So welcome back from the breakout rooms. Thanks again for joining us this morning for actually the last session in our Women in Local Leadership series for 2021. We've had a really good lineup of women leaders in the region and are feeling very fortunate today to be joined by Christine McSherry from Jett Foundation and Casimir Trials. And just really enjoyed this year's program of women, and I hope you all also enjoyed that. And we're actually opening up the nominations for 2022, so you can find that on the website, and we'll drop it here in the chat too. But last year we took nominations for this series, and we're going to do that again this year. So if you know of anyone, if you want to kind of put yourself out there, we encourage you to fill out the nomination form and look forward to seeing what we have in store for next year. Another quick shout out to our sponsors: Hollywood Agency, Partnering for Performance, Mountain One Bank, and Mass General Brigham. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and kicked off and started. I'm going to turn the floor over to Marianne Blackmer, who is actually a South Shore Chamber ambassador. She's Leadership South Shore cohort, kind of an up and coming leader in the region, and excited to have her moderate today our session with Christine. And Marianne, I'm going to turn the floor over to you.
Great. Good morning. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me here. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Marianne Blackmer, and I am the Community Outreach Program Manager for Mass General Brigham. And the reason why we keep saying Mass General Brigham is we just had a brand change. So Mass General Brigham is a not-for-profit integrated healthcare system that was founded by Brigham and Women's and Massachusetts General Hospital, which are two of the nation's leading academic medical centers. So we have primary care here and specialty providers located throughout the South Shore in Pembroke, Weymouth, Hingham, and Scituate. In addition to primary care and specialty care, we have an urgent care center in Weymouth and a fast care center in Pembroke for the convenience of our patients, open 7 days a week. So there are lab services at most locations, and we now offer mammography in Pembroke. So our services have really expanded on the South Shore. And it's really important to know that although the name has changed from Harbor Medical to Brigham Health to Mass General Brigham, MGB is dedicated and committed to the healthcare in the communities of the South Shore and providing world-class healthcare right here on the South Shore in our backyard. So if you want more information, you can go to brighamandwomens.org/Brigham South Shore or call 1-844-Route-3-736, or please feel free to reach out to me. So I'm happy to be here today. I'm really excited to speak with Christine. I have followed her journey throughout the years. So good morning, Christine. How are you?
Good morning. Good morning. I have to apologize. I'm coming off a cold. And I also told Marianne and the crew beforehand, if I somehow go dark, it's because my son Jett also has the cold. And I may need to run to his side to help him a little bit. But really thankful to have me today. Marianne, great chatting with you prior to the meeting here today, and really want to thank the Chamber. As I was saying in the breakout session, it kind of tears me up here on the South Shore that we are so connected, and that the Chamber has been there to support Jett Foundation since Jett was diagnosed really in 2001. One of the first places that I reached out for help was tell me how to raise money and tell me what to do. And the Chamber has been there for Jett Foundation for the last 20 years. The connectiveness that we have here in the South Shore is just super unique. Just thinking back in the years, the fundraisers that I did early on, were always supported by the Chamber, and you guys always just gave me fantastic direction on where to go and how to support the foundation better. So just a huge shout out to you guys. So thank you so much.
And thanks for being. So for those of you that don't know you, can you tell us just a little bit about your journey? Just give us a little backstory.
There's nothing a little about it.
I was just going to say there's nothing a little about it.
Yeah, I mean it's a couple books worth, unfortunately, but it has been a journey. So I am here on the South Shore. I live in Pembroke. I'm a kind of retired nurse. I maintain my nursing license. Worked at Mass General and New England Medical Center in the beginning career of my life, and interestingly enough, kind of ended my career in nursing when I was taking care of HIV patients. And so that was a really unique time in our kind of regulatory history here in the US, where there was a shift or there was something that really changed because there was this ground swelling of support from a community. And I can actually remember being in a patient's room and looking up at the TV, big old TVs we had back in those days, and seeing on that 12 o'clock news, FDA Commissioner David Kessler and head of CEDAR, director of CEDAR at the time, Janet Woodcock, talking about this new type of policy that they were going to implement. And this is back in the early 1990s. And, since then, speed up, having 5 children, getting Jett diagnosed with a devastating disorder when he was 5 years old of Duchenne muscular dystrophy. Never thought that moment in time would ever come back to me. And that's what I mean. Like when I talk about things being all connected, like everything is really connected in that way. And you'll hear through my journey and my story why that day was so important to me in 2016. Have 5 children, Jordan, Stephanie, Jett, Jack, and Tabor. They're all between 12 and 14 months apart. So really many busy years. Jordan and Stephanie, my 2 daughters, came first, and then I had Jett, Jack, and Tabor. It had 3 boys in diapers at the same time, which was really hard. And they were very mischievous type boys. They always tearing something apart. And took my son to the doctors when he was 5 years old for his annual checkup. And of course I was late because I had 5 children under the age of 5 and I would be late for everything. And just was really devastated to hear that there was a concern with the way that my son got up off the floor. So typical pediatric visit, school-age children, you put your hand, you ask a child to get off the floor. The child gets off the floor, and if they happen to put their hands on their knees and push themselves up, it's called a Gowers maneuver. And they do that because their torso is weak. And so the physician kind of looked at me and he said, I think it's Duchenne. And I, as a nurse, and not having muscular dystrophy in my family, I said, that's impossible. I don't believe it. He looks fine. He's happy. Look at, he just jumped off the floor. He's great, And when you get diagnosed with a rare disease and a life-limiting disease, especially for your child, you kind of go into this honeymoon phase of denial, right? So you look at all the good things that he's doing and all the ways in which he's progressing, and you kind of turn away conveniently when he falls down, or you see that he's having difficulty get up the stairs. So selfishly, the only way I felt like I could really get through this diagnosis without really self-harm, because it hurts so bad, is to create the foundation. So Jett Foundation was created really for advocacy, so people could know and understand what Duchenne was, that Duchenne hit only boys. It's 1 in 3,500 male births, that you don't have to be a carrier of the disease to pass the disease on, but it does come from mom. It doesn't come from dad. So moms live with that guilt. Your child is born kind of normal, happy, and healthy for the most part. And then between the ages of 3 and 7, they start to show some delays. They start falling down spontaneously. They start using 2 hands on the handrail to get up the stairs. They lose a lot of the milestones that they had once gained. And then they start falling. So spontaneous falls just happen. They're walking in school and they just fall to the ground. Their legs just give out. And oftentimes that results in a broken nose, bloody nose, chipped teeth, broken femur. So you have these children who are in these years of growing and beginning to become independent. And then slowly they are regressing and becoming more dependent on others, siblings, parents, other caregivers. Jett was in junior high school right up the street, Pembroke Middle School. And I can remember, him coming home and crying and just saying, I just want to walk with my friends to the lunchroom and I can't. I try to walk, Mom, but I will go about 10 feet and I fall. So that was the day that he had to transition into a scooter. And that's not so bad, right? Because your child is still here, he's with you, he's funny, he's still got that blonde hair and beautiful blue eyes. But you're going through the airport and you have people stop and say, geez, Sonny, wouldn't I love to ride in one of those? It's like, really? No, you wouldn't. So it was kind of through the foundation, like I said, at the 5 children, they were all a year apart. So we kind of always had a middle school here at the house. Everybody, all the other kids would bring their friends here. And so Jett was constantly being socialized and had social activity around him. I soon realized, probably in about 2007 or 2008, is that a lot of the boys with Duchenne out there didn't have the luxury of having lots of kids around them and lots of activity, and a mom who could work as a foundation, create a foundation, but also create it from home. So right there at the kitchen table, right, very grassroots like. And that my kids could come with me to work. If we were having an event, all my kids could come, they could hand out tickets, so they could sell raffle tickets, so they could do whatever they need to do. So in that way, I was very fortunate. I was able to start what I wanted to do, passionately, was raise awareness for this disease, not thinking that I would ever be able to find a treatment for it, because I knew what drug development looked like. But at least raise awareness for this disease, and then try to give other kids what my son had, which was that socialization, that acceptance, and it's okay to be a little bit different. So we started our camps. We started with Camp Promise West. It's named Camp Promise, and if you look at the logo, it's a pig with wings. And we started that camp when H1N1 flu came in, and MDA just kind of came in and canceled all camps without really thinking it through. They didn't think about the kids who don't touch their nose or their mouth because they can't. They didn't think about maybe we can use masks if we're concerned. And it just was canceled in a very not thoughtful way. Like, there was no plan B, nothing in place. And so kids who go to MDA camp can only go until they're 17, and it's a limited pool of people that can go. So some parents approached me. We quickly called around and tried to organize some camp services. But what I found is when I looked around the country is that there were hundreds of kids waiting to go to MDA camp, that they were just on wait lists. And I don't think anybody ever realized that. We used to drive through and put money in the boot and think that all the kids with muscular dystrophy were being taken care of in one way or another. But the organization, MDA, had grown so large and had so many other neuromuscular cohorts under it that they just weren't being very intentional and thoughtful about, I think, the way they were approaching patients. So I kind of shifted. I do this in Jett Foundation. A lot of our team is on the call today, so they'll appreciate this. I kind of would just walk in and say, all right, here's the problem. There needs to be more camps. What can we do to fix it? And I think when you approach problems that way and you're very sincere and very genuine, and your mission is not about you, but it's about them, the team would be like, well, where are we going to get the money for that? I'm like, I don't know, but if we say we're going to do it, we have to do it, and we will do it. And so we did. And so that's kind of how our Camp Promise program got built out. And if you remember correctly, the pig was H1N1 was a swine flu. So it was kind of like when pigs fly. So that was the logo for Camp Promise. That was the story behind that.
Great.
Very creative. So anyways, it was through that journey of camp and really seeing lots and lots of kids who had Duchenne muscular dystrophy, realizing that science was slow and the $40,000 or the $50,000 that I was raising was helpful, but it wasn't going to truly impact the drug development community the way it needed to in order to find a cure. We pulled together all the Duchenne organizations throughout the world. We created something called the Duchenne Alliance. We had about 40 something organizations. We pooled our money together. We raised in about 24 months, I think we raised about $8 million, and we were able to put that into some research. But more importantly, it wasn't the money that helped. More importantly, what it was breaking down those silos between those organizations and getting those organizations to start to work together for a common goal. Once I was able to break down all the barriers, the money just flowed in. But it was really the relationship building that happened among the organizations throughout the entire world that were somehow affected by Duchenne that was able to create the success that we had in 2016. So in 2012, through one of my camps, I noticed that there was a boy in a clinical trial who was doing much better than he should have been doing. And I wondered why. So I reached out to the company. I attended some of the investor presentations. And it didn't take me long, and I am only a nurse and was running a nonprofit. But it didn't take me long to look up at the data that the company was showing to the rest of the world and see that the boys who had Duchenne muscular dystrophy, even though it was a really small cohort of boys, it was only 12 boys, that there were improvements in the patients that were receiving the drug. And there was a decline. It wasn't a huge decline, but there was a decline in the 4 patients that weren't taking the drug. And to me, as a mom, and knowing what how hard it is to get a drug through drug development, how hard clinical trials were, because at that point, Jett had participated in a few. And to me, that was the most promising data that I had ever seen out there in the entire world for Duchenne muscular dystrophy. So I did what every mother would do, and I got up at 5 o'clock the next morning, and I sat in the car for 2.5 hours, and I showed up at the company's front door with Dunkin' Donuts coffee and waited for the CEO to show up. And he did, and he just kind of looked, and I said, "Hi." We're Jett Foundation. You probably heard of us. He's like, "Yeah, I've heard of you." I'm like, "Okay, well, I really want to talk to you about your drug." Well, it took about 3 weeks of me going in there at 5 a.m. with Dunkin' Donuts coffee before he finally invited me back into his office. And the reason he did wasn't necessarily, I don't think, the reason he did is he knew that I had created this alliance. He knew that his drug had some efficacy, but it wasn't a huge jump off the charts. Like, wow, that drug is super efficacious. Like, this is amazing. He knew his drug was helping. He wasn't sure how it was helping people or the kids that were in the study, but he knew that I had created this alliance. And he knew that in this rare disease, with a drug that was treated on a very small population of patients who have a variety of different symptoms, that it was going to take a village to get FDA to listen and to look at the data. So in some ways, as we go through the story, I was kind of a chess piece in this whole story without even realizing it, all the way from the day that I saw accelerated approval by David Kessler and Janet Woodcock, when I saw that policy in live time on the news back in the 1990s happen, all the way through until this drug finally got approved in 2016. So that CEO kind of used me as his chess piece because I had a handle on all the organizations throughout the world. And I had a mouthpiece to be able to tell all those organizations how that drug was working. And so that's exactly what I did, is I used Google, I used newspaper articles, I used everything I could, social media especially was big, to find those 12 kids that were on that drug. Now, in the meantime, this is 2011, 12, 13, Jett was dying. He had not only gone from falling and going into a scooter, but now he was in a power chair. Now he was getting some respiratory support. Now his heart was beginning to fail. And yet here I am getting on another airplane to find a child in Los Angeles, California, who I think is on this experimental treatment. And so it was really ironic. I was trying to save his life by getting the evidence that we needed to show regulatory agencies that this weird, crazy drug worked on those 12 boys. And then I needed it for my boy in order to save his life, because he was going to die within probably 12 to 24 months if I didn't. I mean, that's where the nursing comes in. Unfortunately, I know what sleep apnea looks like. I know what his cardiac ejection fraction looked like. And I knew he was going downhill. So the way the story went is that at the same time, I began to hit up FDA. FDA is hidden in this campus, White Oak campus in Maryland. So I remember arriving in DC and getting into a cab and saying, "Take me to FDA." And they brought me way out to the middle of nowhere. And I swear the cab was taking me someplace else. Like that was a code word. If any mother shows up at the airport and wants to go to FDA, take her to the cow pasture. But as it turned out, I was able to get a meeting with the commissioner. I had made enough noise and I had made enough inroads of calling FDA so many times because I wanted them to take a different look at this data set. They weren't looking at it through the lens of a caregiver or a mom, and they needed to, because the way that they were looking at the drug was the way that you would look at a drug that was treating, 100,000 people. Mm-hmm. In drug approval or in drug development, sponsors or pharmaceutical companies will come in and they pick a primary or secondary outcome measure or endpoint. When you're developing that drug, the hypothesis is you're going to hit that primary endpoint. Something's going to change and you're going to meet that primary endpoint, and you're going to bring that data along with some placebo data back to FDA so that they can clearly discern that this drug worked in this population on the outcome measure or the endpoint that you said it would. The science works, and that the placebo didn't get any better and they may in fact have gotten worse. So when FDA was looking at this really small data set of only 12 patients, what they saw and what I saw were two different things. I saw that the drug was working. They saw that the drug wasn't working, and it was based on an outcome measure or primary endpoint that was never important to the patient population to begin with. So that was FDA and the sponsor's first and big mistake. And that has been the mistake of many traditional drug development programs in rare disease. It's okay if you have 100,000 patients and 75% of them get better on the blood pressure medication. But when you're only working with 12 or 20 patients, you don't have that big N number or that P value to be able to compare to. So the primary outcome measure that the company had selected was something called the 6-minute walk test. And that means how far can you walk in 6 minutes? 300 meters, 500 meters, 700 meters. It was used as an endurance test for pulmonary and cardiac trials. This was a neuromuscular disease that took away your ability to move because your muscles are dying and they die every day. So to place a patient into an endurance test to see how far they can walk in 6 minutes didn't line up with what the patient values were. So in these patient communities, neuromuscular diseases, ALS, multiple sclerosis, which are more common, Duchenne, other congenital muscular dystrophies, it just becomes really hard to move because your muscles are dying. It's a progressive muscle weakness. It's just hard to move. And what we found is that patients want to be independent and as social as they possibly can, even though they're sick. When we went back and asked Duchenne boys who had Duchenne if they wanted to walk fast in 6 minutes, they all said no. We don't have any desire to be speed walkers. We just want to be able to use the restroom at the age of 13 without asking mom. So it wasn't, so the outcome measure wasn't meaningful to begin with. And so it really took me and all that village that I created to go back to FDA and say, the outcome measure that was used is the wrong outcome measure. However, the patients are getting better. They're getting better in different ways, in things that they find meaningful. FDA, as I said, I went out there and found those 12 patients, but FDA kind of put me on that mission. They said, okay, if you think, someone combing their hair is important to them and you can quantify that, bring it back to me and I'll approve a drug on it. So I went out and found those 12 patients and I interviewed all of them. I videotaped many of them. And in the meantime, I kept having conversations with FDA. I kept the story in the Wall Street Journal. I think we were in there at least 6 or 7 times through those years. I had the New York Times kind of after me as like being a puppet for the company. I had the ear of all of our local and wonderful congressmen and state senators, as well as our federal senators. Senator Markey and Senator Warren were fantastic through this journey. I would be in Senator Warren's office and she would literally just pick up the phone to FDA and say, I want to talk to somebody now. Mrs. McSherry is back in my office. Senator Markey would do the same thing. All their health LAs are fantastic. I had support from Republicans as well as Democrats. So from Rick Santorum and Marco Rubio, all the way to Senator Sanders and Senator Warren. All of them were just very involved in trying to help figure this out. What ended up happening is I brought back this evidence, this video type evidence to FDA. And I said to FDA, look at this boy in California, he couldn't walk his dog prior to drug. He now can walk his dog and he doesn't fall down. That's what's important to him. They said, okay. They watched the video, they were impressed. I said, look at this boy in Chicago. He can play in a volleyball team. He shouldn't be able to get his arms up over his head because he's so progressed in his disease, but he can. But guess what, FDA? He doesn't care about getting the ball over the net in the volleyball. He cares about watch what happens at the end. And at the end of that video, that little boy walked over and he got in a huddle with his team And he came out and he had this huge smile on his face. And I said, that's what's important to that child. It's not the fact that he can play volleyball or can't play volleyball, it's the fact that he can still be part of a team. And that's what he wants. And then through those conversations, FDA had a meeting with the sponsor. The sponsor's name is Sarepta Therapeutics. They had a type C meeting with the sponsor. And at the end of that meeting, Janet Woodcock, who I had been most communicating with, went up to the CEO of the company at the time and said, Mr. Garabedian, I'd like you to do another study. And he said, what kind of study? And Janet said, well, I'd like you to do a study in older boys and younger boys, because I want to see how the dog reacts. You've got this middle group of kids who are supposed to lose the ability to ambulate, but I want to see how it does in the older population, in the younger population. Can you do that? And, you know, if FDA tells you to do something, especially Janet Woodcock, you just do it, whatever it is. So he looked, he said, of course, Dr. Woodcock, I'll do that. And then she looked at him and she said, and I want you to start that older boy study in Boston.
Oh, that's wonderful.
So in November of 2014, Jett was able to get his first dose of that medication. It was still in a study, it wasn't approved, but he was in a kind of a safety study. The CEO actually came to the hospital that day and sat with me and said, you know, Jett is our oldest, I know, sickest, I know, heaviest, I know, kid that we've ever treated with this drug. I said, I know, Chris, I'm not going to look for anything. It's just going to be a regular day, regular couple of months. He said, you know, we never saw anything for at least 6 months in those boys. I said, I know, it's fine. I'm not going to even look. Well, Jett had started Bridgewater State College that year, and he had a helper over there. The only reason I let him start is because I knew he was going to be going on drug. And so I felt safer with him going to college as a freshman. So Mario was his helper. He was a little grumpy first semester. Jett started drug November 14th, 2014, I believe it was on drug every week, went to Mass General every week, got an infusion, came home for Christmas break, went back probably the second week in January of 2015. And when he went back, his roommate brought him home that Friday after being back the first week. And he said, hey, we're all feeling better or something like that. And I said, well, what do you mean you're feeling better? And he said, well, I'm sleeping better. And I said, who's sleeping better? And he said, well, I'm sleeping better because Jett stopped snoring. And I said, what do you mean he stopped snoring? He had been only on drug about 8 or 9 weeks. And he said, yeah, I didn't know what to say to you before, Mrs. McSherry, but it was really hard sleeping with him in that room, you know, the first semester because his snoring was so loud, but he came back from break and he's not snoring anymore. And so there be the something that was really important to him as a patient, to me as a caregiver, and to his overall health, to say that that drug was actually working long before we thought it was working, and it was working in a different way than anybody would have ever suspected. So as you can imagine, I laid on the floor that night, listened to him breathe, and sure enough, he had stopped snoring, and I know my son's breathing very well. Got in the car the next day, showed up at that same CEO's office and said, this drug works. You have no idea. It works in a different way than you thought. What do we do about this? And he really didn't have an answer. He said, tell FDA, I don't know. So I ended up filming some of the other boys that were in that safety study along with Jett. We got before and after videos. Jett progressed in his, not in his disease, but he got a little bit better. He started regaining milestones that he had recently lost. So he used to be able to, he would reach over and pat the dog and not be able to get his arm back up on the power chair. So I would do it for him. One day I noticed, it was probably in January, February, he reached over, he patted the dog and he brought his own arm up. So little things like that were changing. He was able to open our closet door, even though he was in his power chair, and open the closet so he could reach the dog food and actually try to feed the dog. So he hadn't done that since he could walk. And then the most significant one was one Sunday. So he's a freshman in college. And like I said, I have the 5 kids are all a year apart and the 3 boys are especially close. And they were in the basement on a Saturday night and Jett came upstairs and he has ramps that go from the basement all the way up into the house. Came upstairs and he's in his power chair and you could tell he had a little bit to drink. So he's kind of going down the hallway like this in the power chair. And I'm like, don't hit the walls. Just don't hit the walls. got him into bed, sat with him in bed, and just kind of made sure that he was okay, listening to him breathe and such. The next morning, the fourth son gets up, Jackson, comes downstairs, and he said to me, Mom, don't be mad. And I said, why? What did you do? You know, and I'm looking around the house to see what prank he probably pulled the night before. And he said, well, you know, when Jett was in the basement last night, he had a little bit too much to drink. And I said, I know. What happened? And he said, well, he could reach over, grab the beer, and open the beer himself.
Wow.
So these were the types of things that I was seeing. So I started capturing them on video, as well as some other kids who were doing before and after activities that we wouldn't expect that they would be able to do or gain back the ability to do. And we took all of that film back to FDA. And it was that film and that discussion with the leadership at FDA that gave her the ability to override the entire agency. Janet Woodcock again. In one of my last conversations with her, you know, before she was able to get Jett on drugs, I said, remember in AIDS, Janet, we always saw our sickest patients get better first because they were so sick. If they made any movement towards getting better, you noticed right away. But when you are kind of okay, like there's a lot of noise, you may not notice that something improves, right? But when there's no noise, like in Jett's case, I knew right away that things were changing. And that was kind of like what made her want to look at the non-ambulatory boys. So anyway, so she was able to get that data. I brought all of that data back to FDA. I had some help from attorneys to organize that data. We presented that back at FDA in August of 2015. At that point, the drug had been pulled back by FDA 3 times. So there was the possibility that I was going to lose access to the drug in those couple of years. And all those other kids would lose access as well. Exactly. And that was the reason why I would reach out to the newspapers, into the news, Channel 5, Fox 25, everybody covered it. But I would have to keep blowing it up, you know, and then Janet would come in there and she would kind of fix it and get it rolling again. But after we gave that presentation back to FDA, Janet had basically what she needed to go ahead and approve the drug. We had to go through the AdCom process, which is what we're hearing about now with COVID. You sit down in front of an advisory board. April 25th, 2016, we had the largest advisory committee meeting in history. We had about 1,200 people there. About 800 of them were families that were affected by Duchenne. We held camp during the FDA advisory committee meeting, just so we had kids and families there, but they were safe. And Jett Foundation did a fantastic job at organizing all of that. I was able to give a 10-minute presentation to the entire group, as well as everybody who was watching online. And then the advisory committee came through, just like the Alzheimer's drug that you probably recently heard about. The advisory committee said no. Some of the folks at FDA kind of said, no, we're not going to approve this drug. And at the end of this meeting, Janet Woodcock came back over to me and our team and said, I said, are you okay? Because it's been 13 hours. We've been deliberating and talking. And she said, oh, I'm fine. And I said, the families are really upset because the committee said no. And she said, that's okay. She goes, at the end of the day, I'm still the boss.
Wow.
Okay. She went out, she stayed with some of the families. And then in September 19th, 2016, she overruled everybody. She got her commissioner on board and she approved the first drug in that rare disease. So it was the most controversial drug in history ever approved. Other than the Alzheimer's one, it would still be. But that's amazing. So that drug he's been on since 2014. He continued to get better, that he stabilized in his disease. He's still pretty sick, but he wouldn't be here without it.
That's really amazing. So is that we're wrapping up to go into question and answers, Christine? So is that how you
Have we answered none of your questions?
No, did you to transition to Casimir? Is that what, using all that knowledge? So we know what the Jett Foundation is. Can you just let people know what Casimir is? Because I mean, that's amazing. Well done. Bravo. That's just remarkable. That's remarkable, that story. But just so then you created Casimir in what year?
So then the end of 2016, once the drug was approved, we went ahead and created something called Casimir. And what Casimir does is exactly duplicate what I did with Duchenne. We go into other rare diseases where sponsors don't have good outcome measures that are meaningful to patients. We use remote data capture, so we do everything remotely from the home. We use caregivers to capture whether a child's speech has changed, communication has changed, agility has changed, gross motor, fine motor. And Casimir Trials now is global. We've got about 40 employees, 30 something studies, and our goal is to hopefully change the paradigm of rare disease and make sure that we develop outcome measures that are meaningful to patients and that we can capture in a meaningful way.
Right. It's really important what you've done is you've let the drug companies know that they're treating a person, not just a rare disease. And that's really impactful globally, but also in the everyday lives of these patients and their families. So thank you for all those efforts that you've put towards everything. It really is remarkable. Courtney, did you want to open it up to question and answers? Or Christine, is there anything that you did not cover that you feel is really important you want everybody to know?
I think what I want people to know is that if you have a passion or you have an intent, it's good to set that intent and everything else will fall into place. Like, not to get overwhelmed. It's easy to get overwhelmed. But if you set that intent in place and it's genuine and sincere, like I always say, you will get there. It might be a different path, but you'll achieve it.
The other thing really I want to bring back just for people that your camps, which really important to know, because I spoke to one of your people, there's no age limit on the camps that Christine runs, which MDA had put a cap at 17. So I think, again, that treats a person, not just an age. You're 17 doesn't mean that you just don't go to camp. So I think that's awesome. Courtney, do you want me to moderate the questions, or do you want
to do
it?
the Q&A. So if anyone has questions, we're just going to open the floor up. And if you have a question, you can raise your hand. Peter, you're up first. And then, or you can unmute yourself and just chime in. Again, these are very informal, so feel free to chime in. Peter, you're up.
An incredibly impressive and moving story. I'm not sure if I've had another guest in the South Shore Chamber where I actually ended up feeling totally worthless at the end because I haven't done anything. I haven't seen people do what you did. I have a couple of leadership questions for you. First, just comparing some leadership styles. What was with the CEO of the pharmaceutical that it took him 3 weeks to meet with somebody who depended on the product he was producing? What was going on with him? And then with you, do you think your leadership success is based more on the persistence and not giving up, or on the creativity of looking at a problem differently? Which is more important?
So the first question is, it took him 3 weeks because he was in such a fragile spot, both with money, his investors, the analysts, that he didn't want to upset the apple cart because he knew what he had was so good, but yet so fragile. And I could have been I could have been the one with the black mask and the toy gun that came in at 2 a.m. and tried to steal the drug out of, he didn't know me from anything. I could have been the person scaling the wall, or I could have been the person who showed up, with a fake badge, and I was, Cambridge Police Department. So he had to really do his due diligence on me and make sure that I was a safe person to go to. And I think once he did that, that's when he opened the doors and let me in. He knew I was safe, right? I wasn't going to get him on the front page of the Globe quite yet. So I think that to answer the second question was, I think that there's always a path to do things. I think it was my creativity. I don't think, I really do. I think that I am a really good person at pulling people together who are smarter than me, or maybe have different experiences than me, and admitting that I don't know it all. I have no idea what I'm doing with this policy stuff, this accelerated approval. I don't, can someone tell me, And so being creative and putting people in the right places to help me achieve what I needed to achieve, and making sure that they felt empowered to do that was the reason behind my success.
Yeah. And if I can just ask a marketing follow-up, the whole muscular dystrophy field of diseases and treatment is, my sense growing up is that got on the map because of the telethons. With the telethons over, is it harder to deal with this family of diseases and raise money? Or how does marketing work with issues like healthcare and treatment?
Yeah, so I think what it did is it really sparked the interest of both Little Pharma and Big Pharma to come into the rare disease space. We made it very attractive. We said, hey, look at pharma, we're going to welcome you with open arms, and we're going to beat the doors down at FDA and let them know that a drug works if it works, right? And you've got friends in this community. We're not going to scale the building wearing a black jumpsuit, but we are going to be savvy and understand what regulatory is, understand where Congress weighs in, understand what the cures, 21st century cures are, and we're going to add to that package. Like, we're going to help you, pharma. If your drug works, you've got a community here that is going to fight like anything for you. Got to give us good data, and you have to be a good partner in this space. But otherwise, you can partner with the rare disease community, and we will help you get these drugs approved. So that being said, that just opened the floodgates. You had companies like Roche and Bristol Myers and Pfizer, as well as really tiny companies come into the space because they're like, okay, they're gonna find ways to get our drugs approved. We need to listen to them, and together we can cure diseases.
Awesome. Does anyone else have a question at the moment? If not, I have one. Okay, I have a quick question for you, Christine. So there's been a lot of talk, research recently about caregiving and the workforce generally, and how we're hearing a lot from our members about the role of caregivers in the workforce, not just healthcare, but in other roles, and kind of how, whether you're a parent or you're caring for your elder parents or whatever it is, and how that's impacting some workforce here. And I'm wondering, how do you create space? Like, how do you create that space for you to kind of separate? I mean, obviously you're never going to separate yourself from the caregiver. How do you decompress? How do you find your me time? How do you navigate that?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I've been thinking about it since I read it yesterday. You sent it over to me, and I don't think I'm very good at it. I'm a really good role model at it. I will tell you a couple of secrets that I have, though. I don't think Mother's Day, birthday, Christmas, any of those days are like really important days for me to take as a me time, because if you set your expectations like, oh, today's my birthday, I'm going to get my nails done, I'm not going to have to pick up the kids, I'm going to get takeout, right? Something's going to happen. Like, it's not going to work out. Okay. So don't even set the expectation that it's going to be your day or your time. What you do is you just wait for all of a sudden something happens, something opens up. Like, it's a beautiful day, your husband took the kids, or Jett's brother came home and took him to New Hampshire for the weekend. And then I go, oh, this is my holiday. This is my time. This is my day. So I've learned just to not expect it or try to make time for it. I just appreciate it when it comes through, and I recognize it.
Okay, good. Thank you. Anyone else have a question for Christine? Okay.
I have one.
Yeah.
Just one.
Yeah.
So Christine, like, as a leader, because you are a leader, I love that you give people an opportunity to do what they're good at. And then, you surround yourself with really good people to have a common goal. But as a leader, what are the biggest roadblocks, do you think, for women in leadership today?
We have men on the phone, don't we?
It's okay.
It's okay.
I think, when I look at our industry, the industry that I'm currently in, whether it's working with contract research organizations, pharmaceutical companies, drug developers, there's very few women in those leadership roles. And I think that's unfortunate, because we are the best multitaskers there are on the planet, right? Like, my husband's probably in there trying to take care of Jett right now. I'm sure the door is going to slam open any minute now and just be like, I can't operate two machines at one time. So sometimes I find that men are really good multitaskers, but they're very focused at what they do. And they can only sometimes do one thing at a time. But I think what I would love to see, especially in my industry, is to have more of that maternal, along with a little bit of a business side, leaders in those roles. And I think we shouldn't be afraid to put women on you know, the boards of pharmaceutical companies, they should be free to lead pharmaceutical companies, that they're oftentimes leading with a business mind, but also with a sense of heart, and they're not afraid to sit in that boardroom and hurt somebody's feelings because it's a stupid idea. I don't know that, but that's
Great.
just what I find.
Yeah.
Like if it's a stupid idea and it's going to cause my kid, you know, to be in pain because of a clinical trial, like, why are we going to do that again? Like, to question it.
Got it. Thank you for that. It has been a real pleasure being with you today, Christine. I
Yeah.
just want to let you know that.
Well, I know half the people here, so it wasn't
I
even
know.
intimidating.
Oh, good. I can't imagine be intimidated, to be honest. Well, thank you. Thank you again, Christine, for joining us. Thank you all for attending this morning and for participating in our Will series this year. Again, the Will nominations are open. Please submit your thoughts and suggestions there. Very, very lucky to have gotten to know all of the women leaders this year, and just excited to have you all here, and I hope you have a great rest of the day.
Thank you, guys.
Thank
So
you.
good
Have
to
a
see
great day.
everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Christine.
Thank you.
Good job.